I'm Sam. This is EV Times. Glad you could join us today. On the program today, we have Earthling Auto, and the founder and CEO, Carolyn Coquillette, I believe I said that correctly, is going to be joining us today and talking about servicing electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles. They're a company based out of San Francisco, California, and I'm sure they've got a lot of information for us about how all these things needed, and we need this type of service. So I'm really excited to learn about it. So what I've done now is invited Carolyn to join us. Looks like we got it now this time. Carolyn, can you hear me okay? Hello? All right, so we'll just wait a second here for this to get connected. While that's going on, I'll just tell you a little bit about what EV Times does. We provide live interviews, professionals in the electric vehicle industry, and we usually do it remotely this way. We're looking at in the future possibly expanding out to do it in person. It looks like there's some type of connection here, so we'll just wait a moment for that to kind of catch up. It could be a Wi-Fi connection. I'm not exactly sure. Let's see here. All right, let's try that again. All right, so sometimes these issues sometimes I wish were resolved quickly.
We did it.
All right, there we go.
Amazing.
Okay.
Nice to be with you.
Thank you for jumping on, and I try to make things easy over here.
You got my coworker Jen in there for a minute, so I'm happy to be here. Yeah, thanks for the invitation.
Thank you so much. Really, I know you're a very, very busy person, so jumping on with us today is just awesome. I was giving them a little intro about Earthling Auto, but I'm sure it would be much better if I heard it from you. So yeah, just tell us about Earthling Auto and what you do.
So Earthling Automotive opened for business February 1st, and we are servicing electric vehicles and hybrids in the San Francisco Bay Area. And we are also now launched with our technical training wing as well. So we have stood up both technical training for service professionals as well as automotive service. And we've pursued kind of a teaching hospital type of model where in the past, Earthling has the Earthling origin story is my former repair shop called Luscious Garage, which specialized in hybrid cars and certainly served the electric vehicle community and hosted the Golden Gate Electric Vehicle Association for as long as we were around. So deeply involved with plug-ins, plug-in hybrids, electrification and EV advocacy in Sacramento and beyond. But the opportunity was to sort of reboot that business, specifically focused on sort of where we are now and all that has happened over the last 16 plus years, seeing this market change and thinking really about what we want to do as a business above and beyond just servicing the cars. And that's where the sort of Earthling concept comes in, which is ultimately this idea that, why do we think electric vehicles are important, and why do we think that, driving is important? And all of that has to do with human beings, with Earthlings, and the stuff that we need to do to continue to progress and, adapt and survive, right, as a species. So the understanding around business leadership, not only to be able to help the industry embrace and ultimately support these new platforms, but also to help train that next generation of technicians that can also service these vehicles. And inside of the automotive repair industry, there is a really dire shortage for service professionals, for the magic makers that can fix these magic carpets flying around. And the understanding of how do you actually train and nurture folks to be able to kind of perpetually solve unforeseen problems, right? How do you we're trying to figure out how to teach people how to think, teach people how to learn, and that's something that I'm passionate about, kind of independent of the servicing of the EVs themselves, right? It's like kind of like, what do we as a species need to do to evolve to understand what we're capable of and feel like we have agency over our futures and our capacity to do great things. And education's a big part of that. We see that as a big missing piece in terms of people feeling like they feel like they can be their best person, and really engaging in the world in their mental capacity. So there's just a lot of themes here around Earthlings and humans and technology and where we see the world needing to go.
Awesome. So while, I would, there's a lot of things to go from off of that. So really what I'm interested in, just to start with, is like, tell me more about what the training center looks like. Maybe, you can provide some technical elements in there as well. Really just, I'd like to know more about that. So talk more about that. Yeah.
Totally. So we were fortunate enough to recruit a gentleman whose name is Jack Roseborough to lead our training center. So Jack has 20 years in the aftermarket, and more recently about 5 years working for Toyota North America, training Toyota's dealership technicians. So not the aftermarket, but sort of OE world there. So he's seen sort of both sides of the curtain, right? The sort of insider scoop on what's Toyota's own take on how to service the vehicles and how they're providing training, and then also how we handle training in the aftermarket. So he has a real breadth of experience, and his passion, again, is this idea of how do we teach people how to learn? How do we teach people how to teach themselves? And that model he actually honed while he was at Toyota. So originally they had their courses were 3 days, and they had 8 technicians on 4 cars, so 2 technicians per car. And what he discovered during COVID, when they had to thin that out and go to basically 1 technician per car, was that actually became the ideal case to really allow someone to challenge themselves, face whatever that unknown new curriculum, whatever they were there to learn on, to really face that for themselves and be able to overcome it and take that in. And so we have adapted that same sort of geometry to our training center. So 4 cars, 4 students, 3 days, 8 hours a day is sort of the base unit of training. We are offering some smaller courses at the moment. 1 day, sort of Tesla, we call it Tesla 1, but it's sort of a first sort of, I don't know how would I describe this better? It's sort of like your first introduction, tour of the car, familiarization, like how do you get started over there? And then we have some additional curriculum coming that's more in depth on Tesla and hybrids as well. So sort of hybrid EV1, hybrid EV2. So we do have some smaller courses available, but by and large, the idea there is 4 cars, 4 students, 1 3-day course. And that can be whether it's basic electrical, advanced electrical, hybrid and EV, up into specific vehicle platforms. So we're hosting that currently at my former repair shop on 9th Street in San Francisco. So it's coming from like an auto repair shop setting, and you'll have 4 cars, 1 student per car. There's a little bit of classroom, and then you're out dealing with whatever bugs or specific service activities are set up as part of the curriculum.
Awesome. So that sounds like super focused, very in depth, and really, really, really interesting there. And I'm just curious, aside from the obvious differences between an EV and an internal combustion vehicle, being the batteries and the engine and stuff, can you tell me more about the specifics of what makes them different from each other, and why the service needs, what the service needs would be for that?
Yeah, the great question. So certainly, this is where kind of hybrids and EVs overlap, right? There's some power electronics, larger battery, battery and electric motor cooling systems, all those kinds of things. And then also the electrification of other systems that are sort of more traditionally run off of an engine. So, power steering, air conditioning, stuff like that. How do you get that stuff into a high voltage or medium voltage type of formats? There's a relearn on some basic systems, and then there is an introduction to batteries and power electronics and electric motors that that's relevant to electrics as well as to hybrids. But, you know, in all of these cases, what you're really doing is sort of demystifying a platform that someone probably just hasn't seen before. So how do you get your hands on it? How do you get your hands on the service information? How do you navigate the diagnostic processes, et cetera? Again, because, you know, we could certainly try to get you to memorize, you know, all the different common failures, for example, on a Tesla. But then, you know, next year a new car is going to come out and you're not going to know what those problems are. So you really have to be familiar with just how you fix the car, not what you're specifically fixing. So that's a lot of the work. Similar is true for electrical systems. So, you know, most technicians are familiar with low voltage 12 volt diagnostics. Certainly there's some additional computer diagnostics like, you know, CAN bus and other kinds of protocols that are newer and a little bit more sophisticated than just like 12 volt diagnostics. But either way, folks are less familiar with diagnostics for high voltage systems and, you know, AC and DC at a much higher scale. And also, like, you know, sure, you're used to using a battery, but what does it mean if the battery's, you know, 500 volts and is, you know, 60% of the way to the car? Like, it's a huge component for someone who hasn't really seen that before, how to get their minds around it and even know how to service it. So those things are very new. And that's true, honestly, whether you're talking about the training system, the training sort of arm of our activities or the service arm of our activities. And certainly our own technicians are benefiting from this training as well. So how do we get our own folks trained up to be able to approach these new platforms?
Awesome. Okay. And so I was also wondering, you know, is there anyone else in your area that's doing something like this, like an EV service center? Are you like kind of the first one, or can you talk more about that?
Yes, that's a great question too. So, you know, there are other folks that are certainly out there fixing these cars, and I think that, you know, there's a couple Bay Area folks that have been active over the years, including, you know, Luscious. There are some folks outside of San Francisco that have sort of planted a flag and been doing EV work. The Electrified Garage is on the East Coast and is probably best known. But we're the first sort of, to our knowledge, in our area. And, you know, again, for us, it's an opportunity to not only fix the cars, but also really tool the business so that it's optimized for high, you know, more cost efficient, lower maintenance types of vehicles, right? So it's not just, can you fix my Tesla, but can you fix it quickly and at a cost that is, you know, competitive versus others? And that's unique because there's just less to go wrong on these cars. And so we don't expect to be able to drive the same kinds of revenue and average ticket on these types of platforms than you would on sort of a conventional car. And that drives a lot more pressure, challenge to the business to be ever more efficient and optimized. And for that, we've been really excited to stand up a new sort of shop layout model that's sort of a blend between traditional with a two-post lift where you normally raise a car and service it and, you know, find something that might be wrong, but also kind of a dual express lane where folks are able to go through and have their car in and out of the shop in, you know, 20 minutes or less. So sort of more like a traditional lube lane model. Of course, we're not necessarily focused on lube, although, you know, hybrids still have oil changes. But, you know, again, how do you get that expert service, but also do it in a way that's understanding that your car is not going to need as much work? And our ability to do that and our ability to do that, you know, quickly, it essentially turns into not only a convenience to you to get your car back faster, but to pay less to get your car fixed. And we see that really writ large, not only with EVs, but with self-driving. And when we look at sort of the technology that's happening on board these cars, I really don't see it as like an EV story necessarily. It's really a self-drive story, and EV is just a step along the way. And when you think of like all of the complicated technology that is on those platforms, I mean, obviously we acknowledge that, you know, Teslas are pretty advanced platforms, but it's not the electric vehicle part that makes it particularly advanced, right? It's the other stuff. And so, you know, we acknowledge that those are going to be fleet owned, those are going to be fleet managed, and those fleets are going to demand highly efficient, low cost services. So we really feel like our competitive advantage isn't just on the expertise to be able to know how to fix an electric car, but to how to do that in a sort of more contemporary business model, not the old school way of fixing cars.
You know, that leads perfectly into my next question,
Mm.
which is about technology. And I'm wondering, you know, if you could just take a moment here, and what do you think the next technology is in electric vehicles, and, you know, what does that look like? You can maybe just take a guess at it, that's fine. Or if you actually know something about it, that would be great. So, yeah, what do you think?
I mean, that's a really interesting question. I would defer to Jack on that, and I think it would be interesting. It'd be interesting to connect you with him, and he does a lot more market research and sort of like is more knowledgeable about the R&D
Okay.
space, and he had a perspective on that, working at Toyota as well, seeing kind of what was coming there, and he actually spent quite a lot of time on the Mirai, and you know, which is a hydrogen fuel cell platform. And we've talked about having kind of the Mirai be, you know, like when you play a video game and you like get to the very, very end and you have to like slay the dragon, like having our training actually end with like a Mirai, which of course, you know, no one will have ever really seen or know how the hell it works necessarily, right? Really like from a nuts and bolts perspective and be like, okay, this car is broken, go fix it. Um, so he's got a lot of really interesting sort of vantage points that I think would be better suited for that question. But you know, for me, really the frontier is on the autonomy side. It's been really interesting seeing the approach from Tesla around LiDAR versus just regular optics, like camera optics, and this idea that, you know, if humans can manage the world without LiDAR, then they can see depth and can, you know, navigate safely, then theoretically cars should be able to do that too. So there's still a lot to be figured out on that side. And again, how do you build that platform as cheaply as possible? And, you know, it's kind of interesting to think about, let's say that a self-driving car is, you know, $150,000. And, you know, actually, if you look at like kind of the most expensive car that Toyota makes, it's this Mirai that has like it's just dripping with all of this like ADAS, you know, self-driving, you know, assisted driving technology. It's like $110,000 when you add up all of the components. Like it's kind of insane how much they're investing in their research there. But you know, it's kind of like your iPhone. You would never pay for the iPhone outright if you had to. You end up paying for it in sort of a different way. And so we see this like very, very sophisticated approach to transportation delivery, especially through fleets and through these different platforms, that will just put that much more emphasis on who can service those cars, who can service those cars successfully, and obviously, you know, what on those cars from an equipment standpoint can have the most cost savings. So it's a really, really interesting time. And you know, right now when you look at like ADAS and assisted advanced, you know, driver assistance systems, there's a lot of like shop-based calibration that has to be done. I'm not sure how familiar you are with that, but you know, there's just all these like incredibly arduous rules and equipment and stuff that shops are required to have to be able to calibrate some of these cars. And we recognize that that's just not sustainable. If the car is difficult to fix, it's going to be difficult to own. And so the automakers are under extreme pressure to figure out a way to deliver these cars so that they are serviceable and that they are like, you know, painless or less painful to own. We see that with Tesla starting to offer their parts and their service information now they've offered their scan tool toolbox of the aftermarket still pretty neutered compared to their the factory access, but nonetheless they're acknowledging that they're going to have to make this easier for folks, and so we might actually see less technology on top of these cars as they sort of figure out more of what the computer side can manage.
Yeah, really. Okay. Yeah, that was absolutely. I appreciate you just taking the time there to go into it, and yeah, definitely autonomy. I completely agree with you there. We've really touched on a lot of topics, and I've certainly learned a lot about stuff I didn't know about EVs, so that's great, and hybrids. Is there anything else that you'd like to go into that we haven't covered yet, or you'd like to tell us about?
Well, Sam, I mean, I'm interested to hear from you. Like, what are sort of your perspectives on where this market is going, and like, what have you learned recently that you thought was particularly surprising?
For me,
Mm-hmm.
from what I can tell so far, and I've gone into this, I think I've mentioned this. Maybe I have, maybe I haven't. From what I can tell, it's going to be a combination of things. It's going to be a lot of different solutions that are going to work together to create this new future, this new world. So you've got like long-range EVs for a specific tool set. If you're traveling across great distances, you have sort of smaller range EVs for some smaller areas.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the fast chargers along highways to service that. There's EV sharing. There's going to be, I think, all of those things working together. That's going to be the solution. I think that people have a misconception that there's going to be one thing that's going to come along and that's going to be the thing that changes everything.
Right.
I would argue that the change has already happened, and we're just sort of,
yep.
It's already, the future's already happening in front of us. And so now the thing is like, well, figuring out how to connect all of these things together. What does that look like? Is that software? Is that hardware? Is that more systems? I don't know. But that's what I've concluded up to this point, that it's a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And it really takes kind of what you were talking about, working together. That's what it's about. Mm-hmm.
What inspired you to create this channel and do these interviews?
EV Times. Well, I am very passionate about the environment. It's something that's very meaningful to me as a person. I care about the future. I'm just like, we're not here for very long, so I try to live a life that minimizes my impact as much as possible. Electric vehicles specifically are something that's very attainable to help the environment today.
Mm-hmm.
It's very easy to integrate into society, and so my mission is to document that process. Hopefully provide a platform for people like you and for other businesses and other people to speak directly with people and educate and entertain. That's my mission.
Well, this has certainly been really entertaining. I mean, it's really, I was thinking about this separately, kind of like what we're talking about is like mindset, and how when do people sort of change their minds, and when do we as a society are able to change our minds. And evidently the sort of business thinking on this is that like critical mass is 25% of the population to sort of actually start like a tipping point in terms of adoption and change. And my goodness, I will be in San Francisco, and I oftentimes feel like it's more than 25% of these cars driving around, and all the other different ways, the electrified bikes, the scooters, the trucks, the Rivian, Amazon delivery trucks. Like it's pretty phenomenal seeing all this stuff starting to take place. So I agree with you. I think we're already there, but the process of demystifying that and really helping people like embrace that change, you're providing that platform to be able to help people do that, which is just so important. Anyway, kudos.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, we'll definitely stay in touch. I'd like to know more about Earthling in the future. If we could maybe do like a factory or like a tour of it.
We should do some things live. And then we maybe include Jack, and he can give you some more of his perspective on the technology. Yeah,
that'd be wonderful. So I will definitely reach out in the future. And again, thank you so much for coming on. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Pleasure to be with you, Sam.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Have a good one.